Therefore, his plan is doomed to failure. You have to leave that foreign court and you stop being ruled by the nonsense of Article 8 and the right to a family life, or you don't.
From this government, they say things and they're things that just bear no scrutiny whatsoever. You know, they've literally gone out of their way to do the very opposite of what anyone sensible, any normal voter would want.
Starmer stood frozen for a second, his expression twisted between disbelief and rage as the first reports came in. The king had issued what was being called a decree of restoration, an executive order backed by centuries-old royal prerogative and barely remembered constitutional clauses. What made it all the more terrifying wasn't just the fact of the decree, it was the timing. Just days after Labour's surprise electoral victory, and just hours after Starmer declared the party's new era for Britain, the monarchy had counterpunched with something not seen in modern democratic history: mass deportations. Not of criminals, not of asylum seekers, but of registered Labour voters, those who had recently been granted citizenship, mostly immigrants, many of whom had lived in the UK for over a decade. Their only crime, it seemed, was voting against the Crown's preferred status quo. The backlash was instant. Social media platforms exploded with live footage of immigrant families being pulled from homes at dawn.
These dueling plans by the two main timid parties of how to solve the migrant crisis. And if you don't quit, say hi to the migrant crisis. It will be with us forever. Unbelievable, these people.
Police vans weren't labeled as such. They bore royal crests. The officers weren't in standard uniform. They were part of a new task force, the Sovereign Guard, created under emergency powers. One video showed a woman in tears clutching her UK passport as she was dragged from her flat. "But I voted!" she screamed. "I'm British!" The response from one of the officers chilled viewers to the bone. "Not anymore, you're not." At Labour HQ, chaos reigned. Starmer was pacing frantically, his aides scrambling to verify legal routes to challenge the decree. "This is a coup," one aide whispered. "A soft one, but a coup nonetheless."
Coming out with their plans. You know, what we're going to do is, Keir Starmer, of course, wouldn't even dream of leaving, is they're going to crack down on judges who make those rulings. Look, you can't do that.
The Prime Minister's hands shook as he clutched a phone, trying to reach the Chief Justice. But no one was answering. Many within the judicial arm had gone dark, likely warned or coerced. Some even rumored to be collaborating. TV news anchors looked as stunned as the public. On live television, a BBC presenter's voice cracked as she read the official palace statement: "The Crown retains the right to protect the sovereignty of the realm." Recent demographic distortions threaten this ancient balance. Therefore, by executive decree, temporary withdrawal of citizenship and relocation is authorized.
Therefore, his plan is doomed to failure. You have to leave that foreign court and you stop being ruled by the nonsense of Article 8 and the right to a family life, or you don't.
Starmer addressed the nation a few hours later, but it was a pitiful sight. He looked cornered, not commanding. "This is illegal," he said, voice strained, "unconstitutional and morally grotesque." But by then, videos had emerged of judges, journalists, and even some Labour MPs being detained. The government's legal authority was rapidly being strangled. Starmer's words rang hollow. Across the UK, protests erupted. In London, tens of thousands poured into the streets, waving signs reading, "I voted, not deported," and "King or tyrant." Riot police were deployed, rubber bullets fired, blood spilled. Yet the monarchy remained silent, hidden behind the gates of Buckingham Palace, letting the Sovereign Guard do its work. Strangely, many right-wing commentators and media outlets celebrated the move. "The king is just restoring British values," one talk show host said. "If Labour used immigrants to rig the vote, this is correction, not oppression." These words ignited even more fury, but they also revealed something more sinister. The whole operation had been prepared. The networks were coordinated, the narrative built. This wasn't a panicked act. It was planned. In some areas of the country, immigrant neighborhoods were turned into near ghost towns overnight. Door-to-door removals continued. Border checkpoints reappeared across England and Scotland, with identity checks reintroduced under a Royal Restoration Protocol. Flights full of deportees were reported heading to countries like Nigeria, Pakistan, Romania. even to conflict zones. Meanwhile, Starmer attempted to rally international support, but the response was tepid. The US issued a statement of concern. France offered dialogue. The EU called it alarming, but stopped short of sanctions. The UK's oldest ally, Australia, even offered to help facilitate resettlement for deported individuals, completely sidestepping the issue of illegality. Inside Parliament, Tory leaders stayed mostly silent, some even smirking behind closed doors. One MP was caught on a hot mic saying, "The King did what we only dreamed of doing." Attempts by Labour MPs to reconvene emergency sessions were blocked. The Speaker of the House claimed royal authority had suspended certain parliamentary procedures temporarily. Starmer's worst fear wasn't just that people were being deported, it was that the very legitimacy of elections was being overwritten. If citizenship could be revoked for how one voted, then what future did democracy have? The media was being throttled, courts were under siege, parliament was paralyzed. He wasn't sure who to trust. Even some in his own party had gone silent, or worse, voiced support for temporary restoration.
From this government, they say things, and they're things that just bear no scrutiny whatsoever. You know, they've literally gone out of their way to do the very opposite of what anyone sensible, any normal voter would want.
The public mood began shifting dangerously. As the days passed, some citizens began reporting neighbors, convinced they had voted Labour and thus were frauds. Anonymous tips flooded new government hotlines. Families hid in basements. The chilling echo of history, of ethnic cleansings, political purges, hung over Britain like a thundercloud. And still, the king had not appeared in public. Not once. Only statements read by aides. Rumors swirled that this wasn't his doing, that a faction within the palace, or perhaps foreign influence, was orchestrating the upheaval. But without visibility, without proof, it was all noise. Starmer knew the clock was ticking. If he couldn't stop the deportations within the week, they would normalize. People would adapt. The machinery of the coup would be permanent. And worse, Labour's own voters would be gone. The electoral map would shift, perhaps forever. That wasn't just a political loss. It was the end of any opposition. Late at night, in a heavily guarded safe house, Starmer met with the last few loyal judges, activists, and allies. A plan was forming, not just legal appeals, but civil resistance, international intervention, and even a call for general strikes. But nothing was guaranteed. The country was slipping fast. The next morning, a bombshell video leaked. A whistleblower inside the Sovereign Guard exposed the internal directive. It labeled naturalized citizens as subversive agents, and even included a ranked priority list by voting districts. It confirmed the operation was not just about law, but revenge. Starmer watched it and whispered, "They're trying to erase us." The fight had only begun.